What does the state's pension obligation mean for Pennsylvania residents? I'm Jill Horner. This is Comcast Newsmakers. With me is Pennsylvania State Representative Stephen Bloom. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Jill.
Let's first start with the overall liability. It's around $120 billion, but that's not just the state portion.
Right. Pennsylvania has a large pension program for state employees and public school employees, but there are also literally several thousand smaller pension programs that are all ultimately funded by the taxpayers of Pennsylvania. Some are municipal, some are countywide, some are school districts, and so forth. So if you take that whole liability, the shortfall, in other words, the areas we don't actually have enough money in these pension programs to pay out the benefits that have been promised, the total is about $120 billion. If you think about what that number means, our annual general fund budget in Pennsylvania, the total amount of dollars we spend on a typical year, is in the ballpark of $28 billion. So you're taking 4 times the annual entire budget of the state government in Pennsylvania just to deal with the liability in these pension programs. So you can see the scope of the problem is severe, and the challenge that's facing Pennsylvania taxpayers is tremendous.
What do these state pension programs mean for current retirees, future retirees, and for the rest of Pennsylvanians who aren't in these programs?
Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma because obviously we have contractual and moral and ethical obligations to make sure we do pay the benefits that have already been promised to folks who are either retired or have become vested in these plans. And no one questions that. We've got to make sure we honor the promises the Commonwealth has made. So those folks are counting on the benefits, and we've got to keep the program solvent so the benefits they were promised can be paid out. But going forward, we've also got to stop the bleeding. We've got to take this situation that's getting worse by the day under the current funding formulas and bring in some realistic accounting so that we can really understand the nature and the scope of the liability. And then we've got to start making the difficult decisions to start paying more into these programs to keep them solvent, and then get the new hires and the current employees into a different system that doesn't put all the financial risk on the taxpayers. Take that risk, that burden of that risk off the taxpayers, and really have each individual employee bear the responsibility and the decision-making process of making sure their pensions are adequately funded. If we don't, what we're talking about is the inability to fund the other core functions of government. Whether you care about highways and bridges, or you care about adequately funding the state police, or education programs, or programs for the people who are truly needy, all those are going to be dramatically impacted if we have to spend all the money instead on the pension programs.
So you mentioned potential impacts on other state programs, but you also mentioned the idea of new programs or a newer type of program for current employees or future hires. What could that look like?
We're trying to shift things to what we would call a defined contribution plan. So instead of
more of what we would see in the private sector?
What you normally see today in the private sector. This model that we have in Pennsylvania, this defined benefit type of pension program, has really gone out in the private sector because it's no longer financially viable. It was done in the time when state workers actually made less money than most workers in the private sector, and it was a way to entice people to come and work for the state. Well, today that whole relationship has reversed under these difficult economic situation we face today. We actually have more stable and better paying jobs at the state than many people have in the private sector. So we don't need these Cadillac-style pension programs to recruit people, and they've become an unrealistic burden on the taxpayers that it's getting worse by the year. This year we're spending about $2 billion, but even by 4 years from now we're going to be spending $6 billion just to fund the liability.
Come back, give us an update. Let us know how this conversation is progressing in Harrisburg.
Absolutely. Thanks,
Thank you. We've been talking with Pennsylvania State Representative Stephen Bloom. I'm Jill Horner.